Shalom, and thank you for watching this video from HaDerekh Synagogue. I hope you are liking the content we are bringing you. If you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, that will greatly help us. And to further help bring great content to you from our teachers, if you could please consider to donate to HaDerekh Synagogue. The link is in the description box below. Thank you for watching.
Okay, what I like to do is kind of start in left field and kind of work my way to center field. So when one thinks of the laws of purity, ritual uncleanness is usually the first thing that comes to mind. So I asked, I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but in the past I've asked the question, what is the worst kind of Tumah or impurity? And usually when asked, most consider contact with the dead as the worst. And after all, physical death is the worst thing that can happen to the physical body, so it seems to make some sense. Using terms like impurity and uncleanness really don't help much in determining how to define and understand Tumah. Tumah being, uncleanness. So I would like to provide another view. So in our camp in the wilderness, we have the area outside the camp, which is the world. Then there is the area inhabited by Kol Israel, which is our whole camp. Inside that is the camp of the Levi, and inside that is the camp of the Kohanim. Then inside that is the courtyard of the Mishkan. Inside the courtyard is the Makom HaKodesh, and then inside that yet is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Each one of these concentric areas, or circles if you want to look at it as circles, demands an increasing level of Kedusha, of holiness, to be able to enter. For instance, only the Kohen Gadol is able to enter the most holy place, which is the Kodesh Kadoshim, and only twice, and that's on Yom Kippur. In the holy place, only the Kohanim are able to enter, and only when they're to perform a service, like if he's trimming the wicks, for instance. Not anyone is able to enter these areas, yet not every Kohen is able to enter either, unless a certain level of Kedusha is first achieved. For instance, a Kohen who is in a mission, who has inadvertently come in contact with a dead body, would be disqualified from being able to perform duties at the tabernacle or in the temple until the tasks to rectify the situation are performed and he becomes clean. In the end, a Chatas is required. The Chatas is the sin sacrifice. The concept of Tumah and Tahara, clean and unclean, is a bit more complicated than that. And I think a more accurate definition would be distance. With this idea, one becomes more distant as one suffers from more Tumah or more restrictive Tumah. Tumas mate is contact with a dead body. Tumas ohel is exposure to inside of a roofed structure that contains a dead body. In other words, it's contagious. Nevela and shiratzim, contact with certain types of dead animals, which includes most creepy crawly things, lizards, that kind of, and insects. May nida, zav, zama, zava, contact with certain bodily fluids, which is menstruation or discharges. Giving birth to a child, 7 days for a boy, 14 days for a girl. Contact from a primary source or an object that has been in contact with a primary source, or an object that has been in contact with an object that has been in contact with an object that has been touched with a primary source of Tumah. And it goes one step beyond that too. There's Tsoros. There is Tsara'at. How do you pronounce it? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay, Tsoros is how I pronounce it. Which could be a person, a garment, or even a house. And the parashiyos that deal with this are found in Vayikra, chapters 1 to 15, and the book of Numbers, chapter 19. As well as Seder Taharis, which is in the Mishnah. And if you want, there is I think there's 9 different tractates that deal with it. So it's pretty extensive. So as a general rule, we are told uncleanness from a dead body is the worst kind of tumah. And how can someone argue with the answer, especially when tumas mace is considered an av hatumah, which is a primary source of uncleanness. Has a long and complex cleansing process, and it really is contagious. However, I like to argue against this point because tumas mace simply keeps one from being able to enter the court of the tabernacle. You can go anywhere else in the camp of Israel and have tumas mace. The Metzora, the one who suffers from sorus or leprosy, I'll put leprosy in quotes, please. On the other hand, is removed completely from the camp of Kol Israel. Therefore, what is worse? Yeah. It seems logical that sorus is the worst condition of tumas. The Metzora is to be brought to the Kohen. The text indicates that the Metzora really is not given a choice here. And he's brought to the Kohen. You know, it's so often considered that, or some people consider the sorus to be kind of a physical malady. But why would he be brought to the Kohen? You would think that instead that they would escort the sufferer to the family doctor or to the ER or just kind of taken to the CDC to determine if he's contagious or not, to see if it really is leprosy. So why is he brought to a religious leader? Perhaps a malady is less physical and more spiritual than we think. For all forms of tumah, the process by which one is rendered clean or cured concludes with a chatas, which is the sin sacrifice. When a man comes in contact with the dead carcass of a sheretz, he is rendered unclean. He goes through the cleansing process, provides a chatas, and at dusk, he gets the start of a new day with a new lease on a clean life. So why must he give a chatas? What if his job is to wander the plains between the tribes, cleaning the carcasses of deceased animals? What if his job is to take care of the dead? I mean, what sin have these guys done? None. There's no sin whatsoever. After all, the Mishnah tells us these are the precepts whose fruit a person enjoys in this world and whose principle remains for him in the world to come. In other words, you benefit not only in this world, but in the world to come. These are the honoring of one's father and mother, acts of kindness, early attendance at the house of study, morning and evening, hospitality to guests, visiting the sick, providing for a bride, escorting the dead, absorption in prayer, bringing peace between a man and his brother. That comes from Peah 1:1. Now, if you read it in the Siddur, it's a little bit modified. So there seems to be a disconnect, but only if one suffers from the idea that the chatas is used to atone for sin. The woman who has finished her 7-day nida is not guilty of sin for menstruating. She did not sin for allowing, whether on purpose or accidental, that her egg should die. The man who buried his father did not sin when he became contaminated from a dead body, even if the man is a Kohen. What sin would a woman do who gave birth to a child? A woman who gives birth to a child is to bring an olah, which is a burnt offering, and a chatas. Anyone who has had a child should wonder why one of those offerings is not a korban todah, which is a thanksgiving offering. But it's not. If, as suggested by Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai to his students, she made a vow that she would never again be intimate with her husband. But there's already a prohibition against making and breaking a darim, or even vainly using Hashem's name. So why deal with the possibility with every single birth? I submit that we have a false understanding of the chatas offering. In each case, the text renders, and the person shall give a chatas and shall be clean at dusk. This indicates the chatas offering is the first of 2 steps to return one to a higher state of kedusha. Step 1, the chatas is given, and then you turn into what's called a tevel yom, which is kind of a limbo area. And then you wait until dusk. And that's it. And dusk, now you're clean. So, for this to be true, it needs to hold true elsewhere as well. Parsha Nazir is found in number 6. With this mitzvah, a man or a woman who can choose to raise their kedusha for a time, dedicating their time strictly to Hashem and His service, the Nazir vow. In order to be a Nazir, one must choose to never allow oneself to be contaminated by a dead body, among a few other things. With this vow, the Nazir becomes like a Kohen when elevated and dedicated to Hashem. Also, the Nazir's ability to drink wine or strong drink is restricted. Again, like a Kohen, but a Kohen on duty. Third, the Nazir is to keep his hair uncut throughout the Nazir vow, but this is the exact opposite of the Kohanim, who are to keep their hair trimmed and neat. So, no dreadlocks. Therefore, the Nazir are dedicated to Hashem like a Kohen, but the Nazir is no Kohen. His uncut hair invalidates any attempt to rise to the level of a Kohen. When the Nazir vow is ended, the Nazir is to take, among other things, a Chatas to the Mizbeach, which is the altar. And again, what sin did the Nazir commit? One argument is that the Chatas is for denying one's self the permissible pleasures in life, like drinking wine or beer. But if that's the case, why wouldn't a lifelong Nazir be forced to bring a Chatas, say, every month or every year or something? And that doesn't happen. The lifelong Nazir lives his life, dies, and never brings a Chatas at the end of his vow. Actually, at that point, he can't because he's dead. When we look at these cases, thinking the Chatas offering is for some sin committed by the person doesn't make sense. Instead, let me suggest a Chatas is designed to atone for a drop or reduction in kedusha. When a woman enters a time of nida, blood is expelled from her body and her kedusha falls, and she is no longer able to enter the courts of the Mishkan. When a man has an issue, he ejects fluids from his body and his kedusha falls, and he too cannot enter the courts of the Mishkan. When a person dies, the soul of the person departs his body. The body becomes tameh, and anyone touching it or under the same roof are rendered tameh as well. A woman who gives birth expels the baby, her kedusha falls for 7 days or 14 days, depending on if it's a boy or a girl. If in all these cases a separation causes a drop in the kedusha, what are the mitzorah, one suffering sorus or leprosy? Why is the mitzorah considered unclean? Well, traditionally, the Talmud lists 7 reasons one might be afflicted with the disease, making the malady a physical manifestation of a spiritual or emotional defect. Gossip, murder, perjury, forbidden sexual sins, arrogance, theft, and envy. And those come from Erechim 18a. 16a, I stand corrected. The Midrash and Shimshon Raphael Hirsch focus on gossip as the main source of the malady, as have many more modern and contemporary commentators. They point out it shouldn't be interpreted as a medical problem at all, but rather as a spiritual ailment, because it's treated solely by the Kohanim. These often connect the word Metzorah to Motzi Shemra, which is someone guilty of slander or libel. Motzi Shemra is gossip based on falsehood, just so you know. And Loshen Hora, which most people know, is gossip based on fact. Here, the biblical justifications for the idea that sorus is caused by gossip. So Moshe says the children of Israel will never listen to him. He says, this is Exodus chapter 4. So Moshe gives Moshe 2 signs. The first, is that his staff can turn into a snake and then back into a staff. And he also afflicted his hands with sorrows. Miriam's, Moshe's sister, is afflicted with sorrows when she and Aaron criticized Moshe's choice of a Cushi wife. And that comes from Bamidbar 12. Other later biblical characters who suffer from sorrows are Naaman, a commander of the Aramean army. And after interacting with them, Gehazi, the servant of the prophet Elisha, comes down with sorrows as well. 4 men with sorrows pillage the Aramean camp after it has been abandoned, and that comes from Lachim Base 7. And our Melech Yeroam of Israel suffered from sorrows as well, and that also comes from Lachim Base chapter 15. Oh yeah, King Uzziah also had it as well, and that's from chapter 16. These texts are examples how the rabbis came to the conclusion that sorrows is a contagion. One contracts from Loshen Hora. I have a theory why the rabbis and the sages place such an emphasis on Loshen Hora being a sin that causes sorrows. The creation record accounts multiple times that God spoke and things are created. Generally, this is seen as an anthropomorphic representation of God's creative activities, because after all, God is not like us. But what if, in the process of creating man in his image, God endowed his new creation with the divine ability to speak? Hashem, God, created Adam. He took the dust from the site of the sanctuary and from the 4 winds of the world and the mixture of the waters of the world. And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the breath became in the body of Adam a spirit capable of speech, to give light to the eyes and give hearing to the ears. And that comes from Targum Yonasan, Bereshis 2:7. The Targum seems to indicate that speech is a divine attribute gifted solely to the human race. If this is true, then it becomes a great avera to use that speech with the intent to destroy. When we take that which is holy, in this case a divine gift of speech, and wield it as a weapon, the misuse will not go unnoticed. Therefore, the Metzorah is rendered unclean because his evil speech causes a separation between the victim of the evil speech and those who would listen to the words. And there is nothing more infectious than drama and gossip. Are you on Facebook? When we belittle another human being in order to artificially elevate our self-worth, we are guilty of Loshen Hora, or Motzi Shemra. When she spoke ill of Moshe, Miriam suffered sorrows, and she was expelled from the camp until the prescribed cleaning process was completed. When Korah, Dasan, and Aviram, and for a short time On, decided that the current leadership was self-serving and illegitimate, they petitioned for new leadership. They committed Loshen Hora. As a matter of fact, if you read some accounts in the Talmud, they actually committed Motzi Shemra. They actually lied. Some were consumed in a fire that broke forth from Hashem, and the earth swallowed Korah. What's interesting, though, is that sorrows was not something that afflicted anybody on that. So put that in your pipe and smoke it for a little bit. So something else is going on there as well. Those who suffered sorrows are excised from the community and sent away. They are commanded to cry, Tameh, Tameh, to anyone who should approach. They are subjected to the solitary life of grief and remorse. The Talmud asks, how do we know we are to pray for others? The text answered, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry, unclean, unclean. Therefore, the Talmud is telling us that there are those who need others to pray for them because they are so distant from God that heaven no longer hears them. Such is the case of the Metzorah, for God will not listen to the prayers of those who distance themselves from heaven. When the Metzorah wants to be restored, he must ask the very people whom he spoke evilly to pray for him. Only then will God accept his tshuva. Even Miriam needed Moshe, the victim, to intercede for her, and God heard his prayers. And that comes from Midmar 12, chapter 11 and chapter 11 and verses 11 and 13. Rabbi Nachman once said, the gift of speech and reason were given to most men. The highest form of this gift is when we can speak, but we choose to halt our tongue in preference to another. When we can control our tongue, that's when we know the divine gift of speech has been handed to the master for his use. Only you can choose. Will you choose the divine gift of speech or will you use the divine gift of speech to create or to destroy? Good Shabbos.